Happy Halloween! Hey, it's Sunday night. It's 6 p.m. It's Halloween, and I'm still here. How's your day today? How's your heart and soul? I have been thinking about this live for the last couple of hours because I there's just some some things that have been bubbling up for me. And I thought this topic that I want to talk about would be really helpful for people. It's so helpful for me. Oh my gosh. But first, what is your favorite Halloween candy? I've had two Reese's Pieces. Hey, nice to see you, Tom. I've had two Reese's Pieces, a Kit Kat, no Snickers yet. But I don't get. I live in an apartment building. We don't get trick or treaters, so I don't imagine that's coming. But if anyone wants to send me a Snickers, I'm happy for it. Uh, so listen, if you did Halloween, what was your costume? I did not do Halloween, but I am wearing an owl sweater. I had a lovely day hanging out with some friends today. So, what I wanted to talk. Oh, thank you. Yeah, Tom Bear Fawcett. Um, what has been on my mind is this really deep concept, and it's it's transformational. I mean, if we were all to really get this, it's truly transformational. And first of all, let me ground it in the idea that we all live in language. Oftentimes, if we think about, what's the purpose of language, it is people might say, well, it helps us communicate, we label things with our language. But I would love to take it a step further and think that language is actually generative and creative. We can't create without a language, especially for creating with other people. And so, first of all, taking that into stride, that idea that language is creative and it's generative. And if you were to think back your whole life and think back of all the times that you said yes to something, and to think, what if I would have said no? You would have a completely different life. So, just the simple response of yes and no to the circumstances in your world or what is presented to you creates a different outcome. So our language is creating results for us, whether we know it or not, or even recognize it or not. We're oftentimes so close to it. But I want to introduce the idea of how we get to results. And the first part of it is probably the most important part, and the part that we don't um, do very well. And that is being the observer in our life, recognizing the stories, the paradigms, the moods, the emotions, all of those things that create an experience that lead to actions, right? Because the actions that we take then lead to results. So I want you to imagine that there's something in your life that you really want, and you have choices, right? You either take action or you choose not to. And if you take action and it doesn't get you the results you want, you come back, right? And hopefully you change your action. Otherwise, if you just keep doing the same thing over again, you're going to get the same result. But if you come back, you don't get the result you want, you come back and you try a different action. And then you see what the result is. And if you don't get the right result, you come back and hopefully you try a different action, right? But all of that is contained with what you see is possible from the observer's point of view. And I bet you, if you've ever experienced something where you thought, I've thought about it, I ran out of options, I don't have any other way I can go with this. And then you have a conversation with someone and they help you open up your perspective. And within 5 minutes, you're like, oh, I hadn't even thought of it that way. Of course, I can do it. But that's because our observer is limited. It's limited by our experience and by the stories we tell ourselves about our experiences. We go in and we have an experience, we make up a story about it, and then we forget that we've made up that story and we tell ourselves that the story is true. But someone else could be having that exact same experience right next to us, and they come up with a completely different story. And guess what? To them, their story is true. And I think when we get into trouble is when we think that it is the truth, our stories, as opposed to a truth. And what we really need to get great at is being a better observer of the world, of our worlds, and the language that we're using, and the stories that we tell ourselves that lead to the moods and emotions that we have. Because when we can step back and become a better observer, we have a whole new landscape of actions that we might be able to try. But when we get limited as our observer, those possibilities for actions also get limited, which then, of course, our results do. I mean, this is mind-boggling. But I think we are really good about being observers of other people's lives. We can pretty quickly tell when someone else should be doing something else, they're doing something wrong, they're not showing up well. We can get really good dissecting other people's lives, but we aren't usually really good about turning that eye, that big eye that we're looking at it, back on us, back on ourselves, to say, wait a minute, what story am I telling myself that might be limited? What is it, that story that I'm telling that's lead to this emotion, that's leading to this then behavior or result? You can probably call it that, Tom. I think you call it just self-awareness, checking in with yourself and thinking, of the conversations I had today, what were the results that I got from that conversation? Even if it's conversations that you had in your head, and were those the results that I wanted? And if they weren't, can I go back and have a different kind of conversation? Can I try it a different way? Or is there another perspective I can take? Because the story that I'm telling myself is keeping me limited. Is it serving me? And guess what? There is an infinite number of ways you could interpret the experiences that you're having. But unfortunately, what happens is we create a story and immediately it gets locked in and thinking, well, that's the way it was. The experience is not the meaning. It's the story that we create about the experience. And this is where I can tell you we don't get we're not really great at being great storytellers or observers about the experience. And so I I could talk about this for forever, but I think I might be going in circles with it. But I also want to just invite you to the idea of this is what the rewrite, the group coaching program that I'm starting in January, will be all about. Because if we can get better at becoming better observers in our life, whole new possibilities open up, which leads to whole different actions, which leads to whole different results. So when you think, oh, this isn't possible for me, well, wait a minute. Let's peel that back and figure out what's the story I'm telling myself about this so that I can actually try out something different so I can get a different results. Yeah. So I'm just excited about this. I know it is transformational if we can get better at being observer of our life and the stories that we're telling and the moods and emotions that we're creating with the language that we're using about every experience that we get into. It's crazy. This is something because we're so immersed in this, we can't even tell that we're telling these stories. And so that's where we need to kind of come back and start being better reflective of how our experience in conversation goes, not only with other people, but in conversations with ourselves, because we are in constant conversation. And how we get anything accomplished is usually through conversation, either with someone else or with ourselves. And that's why we need to get back and step back and start being a little bit more reflective on how those conversations are going or why we even had those conversations in that way in the first place. Mm. Listen, if you want more of this, I want you to just plant the seed for the rewrite coming January 12th. There's going to be a lot of work about how do we become better observers and better storytellers about our life. so that we can unpack and get more in just get better at being able to create better stories so that the playing field opens up for us. All right, my friends. It's great to see you. It's Sunday night, Halloween. I hope you had a great day, whatever you did today. It's still not over. It's, 6:11 here in the West Coast of the United States. I will, Tom. I'm going to do more segments on this for sure. And what I want everyone, anyone who watches this, I'd love to give you just a little bit of homework if you're willing to do it. And that is in the morning or in the evening, I want you to reflect back at the conversations you had either during the day, if you're doing an evening, or the day before. And you don't have to judge them, you don't have to shame them. Just think the results that I want. Did these conversations that I had either with myself or with someone else, did they get me closer to where I want to go? And if they didn't, that's great. We'll just take note of that. And if they did, right, these are again conversations we want to have. But if we went into a spiral or a negativity, that's probably something we want to be aware of so that we can start reflecting on, what took me into that conversation? What did I observe? What did I notice? What was the story I told myself? Yeah. So that's a little bit of a homework for you to start thinking about, just observing, just become reflective on how your conversations, both externally and internally, are going. All right, my friends, it's Sunday night. It's Halloween. Halloo! I hope you have a great night wherever you are, and I'll see you next Sunday. Bye, everybody.